My neighbor's garden lights are falling apart, literally. They're also rotted, covered in moss, and host to a few 8-legged micro-tenants.
Howdy.
So during our COVID-19 lockdown, he asked if I could remake them for him, but I took it one step further and redesigned them. Stick around and see how great the new lights look. I started this project by picking up two 2x6 cedar boards from my local DIY store and then milled each board into 3/4 and 1/2-inch stock. To do this, I ripped them at the bandsaw before planing them to thickness and trimming off the rounded edges on the table saw. With that done, I could begin cutting out individual parts according to the simple plans I made in Fusion 360. The edges of the base were mitered on my new crosscut sled before a small rabbet was cut into the top for the old reused plexiglass to sit in. I applied glue to the end grain and used painter's tape to clamp everything together, checking for square with a tape measure. If you're a regular to this channel, it'll come as no surprise that I messed up on this project. If you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe and like button so you can see future mistakes I'll eventually make. In this case, I neglected to cut a rabbet in the bottom of the base on the table saw before gluing the pieces together. A router and a rabbet bit made quick work out of that though, taking just 2 passes and then cleaning up the corners with a sharp chisel. The rabbet was important because this is how the base of the lanterns will attach to the platform in the garden itself. Next, I made the corner centers that will also hold the plexiglass in place and provide support for the corner pieces. After ripping square strips of the table saw, I cut rabbets into opposing sides, 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch. They look funny, but they're square. Is there a name for this kind of optical illusion? The outside corners are cut to length and then mitered at 45 degrees before glue up and assembly in a small jig I made to make the process easier. Pin nails hold the pieces together while the glue dries. A hand plane made quick work of cleaning up any tear out or saw marks left behind. The Kumiko-inspired top panels for the light covers are made out of 5 small pieces for each side of a lantern, joined with lap joints. To cut these, I used the pieces themselves as reference when making marks. This is a more accurate way of woodworking. Having dual stops on the crosscut sled made cutting out the lap joints fairly quick and relatively safe, since if I anchored my hands behind the flip stops, my fingers couldn't reach the blade if I tried. I still paid very close attention to what I was doing, as this is a slightly dangerous procedure. I repeated this process of reference marking and lap cutting for each of the 5 pieces, times 4 sides, times 3 lanterns. In other words, this took a while. Luckily, the joints were cut tight enough that they pressure fit together with a little added glue to help make the joint permanent. The assembly of the body was done by stapling the Kumiko-ish panels to 2 corner posts, then working my way around until I had a square. Staples worked great here. They allowed me to work faster without having to cut fancy joinery or using dowels. This may seem weak, but bear with me. The body is then glued to the base and held in place with ratchet straps while the joints dry. To make the tops, I edge jointed 2 pieces of the now 3/4 by 6-inch cedar into panels. After they had dried, I squared them off and cleaned up the seam with a hand plane before using my table saw bevel jig to add an angled undercut to them. This makes the finished piece look lighter and more elegant. Decorative trim pieces were glued to the bases simply for a better aesthetic. Now, this is the magic. I attached small L brackets to these cross members that were then glued inside of the lantern body. These stop the body from pulling apart this way, while the top and the L brackets stop the body from pulling apart this way. And they hold the top down. Double duty. After sanding, 2 coats of teak oil were applied before the cleaned plexiglass panels were inserted and the tops were installed. Before and after. I love how these turned out, and so does my neighbor, but I'm curious to know what you think. Let me know down in the comments. And if you're curious about what to watch next, check out my video on squaring sticks, the tricky tool that's making a comeback.